I want to welcome all of you to a very special and momentous event here at Olathe West High School, part of the Olathe School District. Today we are gathered to honor and remember a very important moment and a very important event in our history. To every adult here, we lived it and will never forget it. Our lives all changed that day. As a parent, my whole sense of responsibility to my children and how to protect them changed that day. For many of you students, you know it probably more from news reports, history books, celebrating anniversaries, remembering anniversaries of that day. But today, we are all reminded of not only what happened that day, but the many heroes from that day. On September 11, 2001, our nation was under attack. Thousands lost their lives that day in attacks in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. Today, we want to honor the lives lost that day on September 11th. We also want to dedicate today an important piece of history that has been entrusted to the Olathe community and also entrusted to all of us. A piece of the steel from the destroyed World Trade Center in New York is now entrusted to us here. Today we're also going to honor and recognize the extreme sacrifice of those who worked to save and comfort so many during the tragedy. Many of those first responders also lost their lives today while they were trying to save other lives. Today it's an important opportunity to celebrate the selfless dedication of the people who worked to save others 16 years ago today. That means police officers, firefighters, steel workers, medical personnel, public employees, and citizen volunteers, some of the countless individuals who sacrificed themselves to help others. And finally, we want to honor today those who continue to serve others, and these are our heroes of today. There's a famous quote from Fred Rogers that says, "When I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers.' You will always find people who are helping. Look for them." Another famous quote says, "Hard times don't create heroes. It is during the hard times when the hero within us is revealed." Today I want to welcome some very important guests who are here with us. They are helpers and heroes of our community today. First and foremost, members of the Olathe Board of Education, if you could all stand to be recognized. Members of our district administration and the Olathe Public Schools Foundation, please stand. Today we have with us the mayors of two great communities, Olathe Mayor Mike Copeland and Lenexa Mayor Mike Boehm. Please stand and be recognized. We also have officials from the Olathe City Council and county and state government. Please stand and be recognized. City of Olathe and Chamber of Commerce officials, please stand. We're also honored to have members of our 21st Century District Advisory and 21st Century Public Safety Design team. Please stand. Next, it's my honor to welcome Olathe District Board of Education member Rick Shear and Olathe Mayor Mike Copeland to come forward and say a few words.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your day and joining us here today. I would also like to recognize our elected officials, my fellow board members, our first responders, and our future first responders. Today we have gathered here at our newest high school for two reasons. First, we're here to remember and honor the tragic events on 9/11 and honor those who have lost their lives, especially those first responders and their families. Secondly, we are here to dedicate one of the last artifacts from the World Trade Center tragedy that will be displayed right here with our 21st Century Academy Public Safety. This is what I love about Olathe. Once again, the collaboration of the school district, the city, and their combined efforts to secure one of the last artifacts from the World Trade Center. This was a team effort of the Board of Education, the Olathe School District, the City of Olathe, and many more. Dedicating the artifact is a very important symbol and a reminder for us, and it will help us to keep our course with making this 21st Century Academy a huge success. I want to thank you again for taking your time out of your day and to be present with us today and supporting your school district, your whole city, and your first responders.
Good morning, everybody. It is a tremendous honor to join you this morning in paying tribute to the heroes of 9/11 and the resilient spirit of our great country. I speak for all of us on the Olathe City Council in saying thank you to our speakers and everyone who worked to make this dedication ceremony possible. On this 16th anniversary of 9/11, we are especially mindful of our dedicated fire and police personnel, the brave men and women in our military, and other critical emergency responders across our nation. We are truly humbled by the debt of gratitude we owe them, and their service and sacrifices do not go unnoticed. They have accepted the high calling of service to their communities and country, and we salute their courage, their integrity, and their commitment. Our deep appreciation and respect for those who served in the aftermath of 9/11, as well as those who serve today, are woven into the very fabric of our community, and it is who we are as Olathans. As mayor, that makes me very, very proud. While our hearts are saddened at the memory of those who are lost, we know their legacy will never be forgotten. It will live on in our hearts and in the service of brave first responders everywhere. It will also live on in the lives and the spirits of students in the 21st Century Safety Academy here at Olathe West High School. In dedicating this very important artifact this morning, we celebrate the vital partnership between the city and Olathe Public Schools. We recognize that time spent dreaming and working together to create a program for Olathe's best and brightest future first responders. Here, students can discover, they can learn, and train for their public safety careers as they follow in the footsteps of our 9/11 heroes. This artifact will forever remind us of those heroes, and it will serve to inspire current and future generations of heroes and first responders in our community, in our country, and around the world. Thank you very much. Kelly?
Our goal here today is not only to recognize the importance of dedicating the artifact from the World Trade Center, but also to hear some of the stories from the events of that day, people who experienced that day firsthand. Mark McGavin is a local businessman and is currently president of the Olathe Public Schools Foundation Board of Directors. He was actually on a business trip in New York and in the World Trade Center when a plane hit the other tower. He was there, and today he is going to share his story.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come in and share my story today. I think it's great that it's really an honor that we have this artifact here in Olathe, and it really means a lot to me. So, on September 11, 2001, I was in a meeting on the 61st floor of the second tower at the World Trade Center. And at 8:41 a.m. we had our first break from our meeting, and a group of us kind of gathered in a commons area outside of our conference room, grabbed a coffee, and we're standing looking out the window at the Statue of Liberty, kind of discussing what we're going to do for fun the next 3 weeks while we're in New York for this training session we're in. But at 8:46 we heard an explosion and immediately noticed debris falling down the windows in front of us. Most of it looked like paper on fire, floating down, landing on the buildings below us, and we really didn't have any idea what happened. But in the next couple of minutes, we we were advised that there had been an accident at the first tower, at the north tower, and that we should begin the process of evacuating the building. So we moved to the stairwell, and again, we were on the 61st floor, so if you kind of think about, there were about 60 floors of people filling the stairwell below us. So we would take a few steps and kind of pause, and then take a few steps and pause again. But by 8:55 a.m., we had made our way to the 47th floor. And at that time, an announcement actually came over the intercom in the building saying that the building was secure and there was no need to evacuate at that point. So what we did is we came out of the stairwell, and we noticed an office right next door to the stairs that had a group of people standing looking out the window. And so we asked if we could come in and just look and see what they were looking at. And that put us on the north side of the building. So we actually were able to see the fire and the damage basically being done by the first plane that had hit the tower. So at 9:01, I thought I need to call my family back home and let them know that I'm okay, that there's been an accident in the other tower, but it's not where I'm at. So I did that, and as I was talking to my mom at 9:03 is when we heard another explosion and our building shook. And at that point, we decided, what I said is, I have to go, we're going to go ahead and evacuate, we're okay, we're going to evacuate. And so I hung up the phone and then waited to be able, said I would call back when I got outside. So that explosion in that building was United Airlines Flight 175 striking the tower. It hit on between floors 77 and 85, so that's about 30 floors above where we currently were standing and about 16 floors above where we had started when the first tower was struck. So it's really difficult to kind of to give you an idea or understand the feeling of really the magnitude of what was going on. People ask me often, when did you realize that this was a big deal, or what was really going on? And for me, it really set in when we were walking down the street, and a radio broadcast was coming down out of a car. And on that radio broadcast, you heard the announcer say that the World Trade Center has been struck, the Pentagon has been struck, and the United States of America is under attack. And that's the point when it really hit home for me, and I think for a lot of us that were there together. So as we continued to walk away from the building, I just tried to figure out how to get a hold of my family, and all of you high school students here, most of you probably weren't born yet, but you didn't have your cell phone in your pocket or in your hand 100% of the time. I did actually have mine with me that day, so I just kept hitting redial as fast as I could, but the phone lines were completely jammed up, so it was really difficult to get out, and we didn't have things like any of the social media or texting or any of that yet. So really it was basically the time of just keep trying to call, and as soon as we can get a call to go through, we can let them know we're okay. So the next step was basically just to continue to walk. I decided let's go back to the hotel. It's the only thing we knew. And so we started walking, and soon after both towers had collapsed, we finally came across a furniture store that had a phone that allowed us to use a phone and call home. So it was after both towers had collapsed, I finally had the opportunity to get a hold of my family and let them know that we were okay. So from that point on, we actually just went back to the hotel, kind of spent the rest of the day visiting with colleagues, returning phone calls, just trying to kind of get our arms around what was happening, and then begin the process of figuring out how do we get back to Kansas City. So all flights were grounded, and we knew it was basically going to be that way for a while. So by Thursday, the 13th, we ended up taking a train to Philadelphia, grabbing a rental car, and driving back to Kansas City, which was a great sight to get back to Olathe and be home. So that's kind of what happened for me that day, and I appreciate you having me come in and talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGavin, for sharing your story with us. Dr. Stephanie Evers is a physician with Olathe Health, and Dr. Evers was on an urban search and rescue task force that was actually deployed with FEMA on September 11th. So she actually helped at Ground Zero with rescue and recovery efforts. Dr. Evers represents many of the doctors and healthcare workers who donated their time and expertise that was so much needed that day, and we'd like to ask her to come forward and say a few words about her experiences on that day.
Thank you for having me this morning and allowing me to share my portion of the story, which kind of takes up from where he left off. So, After I graduated from medical school, I moved to Indianapolis to begin my residency in emergency medicine. And one of the opportunities that we had there was to join our urban search and rescue task force that was based in Indianapolis. And at the time I remember thinking, well, this will be really cool. I'm going to learn some new skills. I'm going to learn how to cut people out of cars and intubate upside down and rappel off buildings. This will be really neat. And as I was doing that training and learning those new skills, there was something in the back of my mind that said, you know, I could actually be deployed someday and actually have to use these skills. But of course, I was thinking more along the lines of a tornado or an earthquake or a hurricane. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would find myself at ground zero following the events of September 11th. So fast forward to September 11th, 2001, and I'm a second-year resident doing a Lifeline helicopter shift. And when you're not out doing patient flights, you have some downtime, so I went and got breakfast, came into the resident lounge and turned on the TV, and there's a plane sitting in the middle of Tower 1. So I sit down, eat my breakfast, watching what's happening, and saw live on television the second plane hit the South Tower. And I was sitting there with my mouth hanging open, like most of the country was, saying, what just happened? And shortly after that, the buildings collapsed. And my pager goes off, and everyone who was part of the Urban Search and Rescue Task Force was requested at the cache site to prepare for probable deployment. So I went to the cache site and was helping get supplies ready and doing medical screening exams. And they came up to me and asked me if I would consider being one of our 2 medical team managers to go with the teams on the deployment. So of course, yeah, I'm going, I'm in, let's go. And we didn't know where we were going at that time. We didn't know if we would be going to Washington, D.C. to respond to the Pentagon, or if we would be staged somewhere outside of New York City, or if we would actually be at ground zero, but we got on a bus and headed out. And about 16 hours later, our convoy arrives in Lower Manhattan as one of the designated urban search and rescue teams for ground zero. And as we're coming into that scene, the only way that I can describe the surroundings is that it was just completely surreal. If you can imagine what it's like to step into a black and white movie, that's what it felt like. Everything was covered in ash. There wasn't a speck of color anywhere. It was just gray. And instead of feeling that you were in the vibrant epicenter of New York City, it felt like you were in a third world country that was at war. There was no electricity, no running water, limited communications, and everywhere you look, there's twisted metal and fires and smoke, and you're wearing these gas masks so you don't breathe in the toxic fumes. And that's where I was going to be spending the next 2 weeks. The situation that surrounded the disaster of September 11th was very different than anything that we had ever experienced. For one, the sheer physical destruction that happened, it took up several city blocks, and when you get there, you just look at this area of mass destruction and you think, where do you even start? And then add on to that the amount of casualties and the loss of life, and it was catastrophic, just something we'd never ever experienced. And the way that the events unfolded that morning, you have a plane that hits the North Tower, you have a plane that hits the South Tower, the buildings are burning, people are trapped inside, and first responders are running in to help these trapped people escape. And then everything comes crumbling down. And when everything crumbled down, not only was there a loss of civilian life, but all of those first responders were lost too. And many of those people were high up in the incident command for New York City Police, New York City Fire, Urban Search and Rescue, and FEMA. And all of a sudden we had to rebuild this whole new leadership and command structure. And on top of that, these are family members and friends and coworkers of people who still have to be out there and do their job. So there's this whole nother level of emotional involvement there that people just weren't ready for. On top of that, it's a crime scene. So everything has to be handled in just a certain way because it's part of an ongoing investigation to figure out what really happened. So every part that we came across, no matter what or who it belonged to, had to be dealt with in a very specific manner. And being part of something like that, it changes you. When people ask me, what was it like to be there? I answer very honestly that it was both the best and the worst experience of my life. The worst because I experienced things and saw things that I can't unsee with my mind or with my heart. But the best because I was able to be part of something that was much bigger than myself. When many of the country was feeling hopeless and helpless and didn't know what they could do, I was in the middle of it. And I got to work next to police officers and firefighters who were working on pure adrenaline, who refused to take breaks, who refused to sleep, who refused to eat because they were just trying to find something to salvage out of that. I worked next to steelworkers who, when they woke up that morning, didn't expect to go to work and be digging through piles of rubble to find survivors or recover bodies, but they did it. And we couldn't have done it without them because we needed their equipment to remove the layers to get down to the next level. So for 2 weeks, I did various missions. We worked in 12-hour shifts on the pile, and we did everything from reconning surrounding buildings to see if anybody who had been trapped or left inside, to going through the collapsed subway tunnels beneath the towers themselves, to often working through the pile and just digging through piece by piece. And it was a very humbling and an honorable experience. A couple years ago, I went back to New York City for the first time since 9/11, and I toured the 9/11 Memorial Museum. And if any of you have been, you've experienced it, and if any of you ever get the chance, I highly recommend that you go. It's very, very well done in a very sensitive way, while still being very realistic in the depiction of the events that occurred. And the way that they've built it all on the remains and the rubble of the original two towers is very, very moving. So the fact that we have an artifact here to be able to reflect and remember on, I think, is also very important. Today, I'm an emergency physician at Olathe Medical Center. I'm also a mom. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. And because of them, I'm no longer on the front lines of FEMA and Urban Search and Rescue. But I'm still very interested and involved in disaster preparedness response at a local level with both our hospital and our local resources. We work to make sure that if anything hits our city, that we're able to respond for any natural or man-made disaster. I'm also part of a national registry of physicians who's available for volunteer services in the event that they need to be deployed for anything else. And who knows what's going to happen with everything with Hurricane Irma, but if they ask for volunteers, I'll be ready. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and share my part of the story.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evers, for sharing your story. While unable to join us today for this special occasion, we do have a letter of appreciation from several important dignitaries. Mr. John Allison, Superintendent, and Dr. Allison Banikowski, Deputy Superintendent, have those words to share with us.
Congressman Kevin Yoder, who actually had the opportunity to visit this building several weeks ago, had hoped to be with us today, but his duties in Washington, D.C. prohibited him from attending today's ceremony. But he did want to send us a few words, and he did that by video. So if you'll turn your attention to the video board for Congressman Yoder's message.
Good morning, everyone. I wish I was able to be there with you today, but I'm on my way to Washington, D.C. for the week. I commend all of you at Olathe West High School, the Olathe School District, and our community as you honor the memory of those who lost their lives on September 11, 2001. I join you in pause and somber remembrance of the victims from that horrific day, and to say thank you to the brave men and women who risked their lives to save others. Today marks the 16th anniversary of 9/11, when 19 men hijacked 4 airplanes and killed nearly 3,000 innocent people in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. Of those who perished in this attack were 400 New York City police officers and firefighters, the brave first responders who ran into the burning buildings as others ran down. The heroism of those first responders who selflessly worked to save their fellow Americans is something that we will never forget. Thank you to Olathe West and Olathe School District for honoring our first responders today and making public service and safety a focus for Olathe West as part of the 21st Century Academy program. Thank you for all your participation today in remembrance of the victims of this terrorist attack. In Washington, we will once again join with members from both political parties to sing God Bless America on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. We will always remember the terrible events of September 11, 2001. Together, we must continue to stand up for the principles of freedom, justice, and liberty of all. God bless the brave men and women who serve our country here and abroad, and God bless the United States of America.
Retired four-star general from the United States Air Force, Richard Bowman Myers, served as the 15th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the 9/11 tragedy. Retired General Myers has received numerous awards and recognitions, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Retired Myers is now president of Kansas State University, and he writes, "Please accept my heartfelt gratitude that you will be dedicating a September 11, 2001 artifact to help preserve the memory of all the great Americans that perished that day. It is especially meaningful to me that your school also wishes to remember the millions of faithful citizens who have responded to the call of duty in its aftermath. Your efforts to bring such an artifact will help us remember the cost of freedom. Your efforts to help our young student citizens remember important aspects of September 11th tragedy may well help shape conditions that their generation to practice good global citizenship, vigilance, and public service needed to forestall similar future events. Please share my congratulations and pride in the Olathe Public Schools. Sincerely, Retired General Richard B. Myers, currently President of Kansas State University."
Next, we're fortunate to have three representatives from the U.S. Military Army Division. Retired Colonel Tom Weefer, Major James E. Wheeler, and Major Michael Wehagen are with us today as we are recognizing September 11th, 2001. Will you please stand? Major Wehagen has graciously agreed to say a few words to us today. He has served in Korea. He's provided advice to multiple Iraqi battalions and served in various locations in the U.S. He's received numerous awards and decorations, including the Meritorious Service Medal. Welcome to the stage, along with me, Major Wehagen.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for inviting your Army to this solemn event, allowing me to speak of our contribution to securing the nation. I am Major Mike Wehagen, a current student at the School of Advanced Military Studies stationed at Fort Leavenworth here in Kansas. I'm also a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom and an engineer officer. I'm going to talk to you today about the impact of September 11th on myself, my peers, and our military institutions in an attempt to provide significance and context the attacks had on individual Americans like ourselves and our military forces. 16 years ago, our nation fundamentally changed with the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the downing of Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I was a senior in high school, much like many of you, and remember watching the towers fall with my classmates as I walked out of math class, followed by the attack on the Pentagon in social studies, and finally hearing the news of the downing of Flight 93 in Shanksville, just 50 miles east of my school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Many of my high school classmates and I, with those images in our heads, chose to join the military, the fire department, and the police force, inspired by the example set that day by the first responders and the passengers on Flight 93. Since that day, the Army and its sister services have stayed in persistent contact with the enemies that threaten our security. In Afghanistan, our nation's longest war, we toppled an evil regime led by the Taliban, who provided safe haven to numerous terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. In Iraq, we freed the population from a despotic dictator and continue to support Iraq in its quest for stability and peace. Today in Syria and Iraq, we are supporting the fight against the terrorist organization ISIS and continue to reduce its control across the region. Finally, the U.S. military continues to stay globally engaged and vigilant to keep America and its allies secure, with forces forward deployed in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Within the United States, the Army supports communities across the country. Recently, the Department of Defense deployed soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen across the Houston area and within Florida to support communities in the aftermath of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. As we speak, members of the military are conducting numerous search and rescue missions, assisting with power restoration, dewatering missions, and numerous other services to assist in the response and recovery operations in those regions. Our military at home and abroad continue to secure our nation and support our communities through the selfless service of the men and women who have the privilege to serve this nation. I again thank you for allowing me to represent the military today's solemn commemoration of the attacks of September 11th and wish you luck with your studies throughout this next academic school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Major. And at this point, could all past and present military personnel please stand and be recognized today? We have another group with us today that we want to recognize. Immediately following the tragic events of September 11, 2001, there was a group of individuals who had to come forward to assist. It was the iron and steel workers. Hundreds of steel workers, and you've heard them mentioned earlier throughout our speeches today, hundreds of them had to put in 14 and 16-hour days at ground zero. This went on for months. They had to be there to help dismantle the more than 190,000 tons of steel to help with those recovery efforts. It was because of their tireless efforts that people were saved, and also that it was made it possible for the remains of so many people be returned to their families. We want to recognize the bravery of this important work by having the steelworkers with us here today, and we are hoping that they will all stand and be recognized. For all of those here today are representing the important role that steelworkers played in the 9/11 tragedy. Please stand. Next, we would like to recognize and honor those many heroes that helped during 9/11 and who also serve today in our community. Representing law enforcement, which played a significant role in the 9/11 tragedy and the important role law enforcement plays each and every day helping others. We have the Olathe Police Chief, Steve Menke. He served as the police chief since 2008, joining the department in 1988, and Chief Menke has a few words for us today.
Thank you. Well, good morning, students, staff, and many special guests here today. I'm honored and humbled to share a few thoughts with you all on this 16th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on our country of September 11th, 2001. Today, we all get the privilege of coming together to honor those lost 16 years ago. And shortly, we will be dedicating an artifact from Ground Zero which will provide us a permanent means to remember. There are points in time and significant events in each of our lives where we can remember exactly where we were and exactly what we were doing when those events happened. September 11th, 2001 was one of those days. Every adult here can tell you exactly where they were that morning. It's clearly etched in their mind. Today we recognize the selflessness of first responders and others who ran toward the areas of destruction and danger to help others. Those who demonstrated the unbreakable human spirit and resiliency in critical moments in life. Those moments when you put the greatest value on someone else's life, not your own. That day changed our society, our worldview, and even some of our core beliefs. Public safety and homeland security are now different since the attack 16 years ago. Transportation security, specifically aviation, is vastly different today. Some of the threats of the past are mitigated, but we are living in a very different world, and we continue to see that each day. Having been with the Olathe Police Department over 29 years now, I remember our local response to the events of 9/11. Our tactical support unit,
was immediately deployed to protect the FAA's Air Route Traffic Control Center here in Olathe. We secured the perimeter of the facility around the clock for several weeks, not knowing what other targets or terrorist plans might be in play. The years that followed 9/11 saw us looking for vulnerabilities and soft targets within our community, our region, and our country. We began to define what would become a new normal in policing, homeland security, and community safety. September 11th changed the world for all of us. As students of the new Olathe West High School, and the select few of you who are enrolled in the newest 21st Century Public Safety Academy class here, you all have unique opportunities. Many legacies stopped and started 16 years ago. Today you have the opportunity to start a legacy. Perhaps it's giving of yourself in your future chosen public safety profession. There is the opportunity to learn from an important yet incredibly tragic part of our country's history. It is also an opportunity to never forget the sacrifices of those who bravely lost their lives that day: citizens, police officers, and firefighters. Nearly 3,000 people perished, and many more than that have since died of injuries or illnesses related to the attacks. We must never, ever forget. Today we are dedicating an artifact from one of the twin towers that collapsed during the attack in New York City, a portion of an I-beam. It is a heavy piece of steel that will rest in your school in perpetuity, a daily visual reminder of that tragic yet heroic day for those of you that will walk into this school every day. Don't let it become just an object on display. It represents so much more for our nation. It represents and reminds us that our freedom has never been free. In our world, in our country, freedom comes at a cost. People can attack our country, our Constitution, our freedoms that establish this great nation. But the one intangible and greatly underestimated thing they cannot defeat is our spirit. It was demonstrated by many 16 years ago, and our history continues to show that. Perhaps some of us adults who lived through 9/11 have let those emotions and memories of the attacks and tragedy and the heroes' legacies fade. We must never forget. September 11th cannot become a page in a history book, but rather a time in the United States history that has and will continue to change and shape our country for the better. And finally, we all have an obligation to remember and honor those that died that day on American soil at the hands of hate. We all have an obligation to never let evil overcome good. All of you here today, like those heroes 16 years ago, reflect the very best of our community and of our country and the unwavering resiliency of the American spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We would also like to have all members of the law enforcement community stand now so that we can recognize all of you as our heroes. Our final speaker today represents the important role that fire and rescue personnel played during the 9/11 tragedy and the important role that they, of course, play each and every day for all of us in serving others. Chief DeGraffenreid has served in the department since 1991, becoming fire chief in 2010. Chief Jeff DeGraffenreid, please come forward and share a few words with us.
Good morning, Olathe West. As fire chief for this great community, I've had the responsibility of providing September 11th remarks at public functions every year. I'm especially grateful for the opportunity to be with you, the students, today to mark the occasion and dedication of the World Trade Center steel that will be a daily reminder to all who pass by that we will never forget. Superintendent Allison, Honorable Mayor Michael Copeland, elected officials, outstanding members of our armed forces, steel workers, fire service personnel, police department, emergency medical services. This is and continues to be a difficult day. A day that reveals the true character of our community, one that is connected and compassionate. In the American Fire Service, we remember and we will never forget the 343 firefighter lives taken from us so cruelly that day. We honor the courage of those who put themselves in harm's way to save people they never knew. 16 years may seem like a long time, but for the families who lost a piece of their heart that day, I imagine it can seem like just yesterday. Perhaps it is the memory of a last kiss given to a spouse, or the last goodbye to a mother or a father, a sister or a brother. We all wonder how their lives might have unfolded, how their dreams might have taken shape. This morning, I turned through the pages of the Kansas City Star newspaper to see what was occurring in the world, and frankly, it's not very positive. The headlines included, Hurricane Irma is devastating Florida. Opportunistic looters are breaking into and stealing from stores in Miami. A gunman kills 7 at a Texas football party. 7 arrested in Portland at rallies. And the UN will likely vote on North Korea sanctions today, and on and on. The question before us, as always, is, with such a steady flow of negative news, how do we preserve the legacy, the good of those who were lost? How do we live up to their example? And how do we keep their spirit alive in our own hearts? Well, I believe that we have seen the answer in a generation of Americans, men and women in uniform, diplomats, intelligence officers, Homeland Security, emergency management, law enforcement professionals, firefighters, all who have stepped forward to serve and who continue to risk all to help keep us safe. Jake Young was in the 3rd grade in this school district on the morning of September 11th, 2001. His mother, a retired district employee, relayed to me that in the days after the attacks, that little Jake Young was determined to be a firefighter. Maybe it was the images of selfless firefighter bravery on the television, or maybe it was the way people spoke of firefighters in those treacherous days. But today, Jake Young is serving this community as an Olathe firefighter, keeping his word and working on the front lines. I've seen the answer in your generation too. Never can I recall a group so willing to go to where needed to help others, so willing to get your hands dirty while serving others, so accepting of those having special needs, and so adept at maximizing diversity to solve complicated problems. You are inspiring to all of us. Perhaps most of all, we could stay true to the spirit of this day by defending our ideals, that no matter rich or poor, big or small, student or staff, realizing that we are all uniquely gifted in some way to serve others. Using your time and talent to make a difference is exactly what the phrase, "we will never forget," is all about. That we stay true to ourselves, that we stay true to what's best in us, that we do not let others divide us. Olathe West, this place is special. This place is new. This place is full of potential. We are all expecting amazing things from you, and not just in the future, but today. We truly mean it when we say, we will never forget. So, I had a chance to speak to a couple people before I came in, and I learned that Snapchat will work in this school if you turn off the Wi-Fi. So here's what I would encourage you to do sometime today. on your story, place a meaningful picture of the World Trade Center steel and the face of you and a few of your closest friends with the phrase, "We will never forget." I'll trust that you'll be respectful when you post, remembering the lives lost in service to others that day. So in closing, you've been a great audience, very kind to clap after everyone spoke, but I would respectfully ask you not to clap for me because it's not about me today, but instead, would you speak out loud the words with me, quietly, slowly, and respectfully? We will never forget.
Thank you, Chief. We would also like to have all members of the fire and rescue community, including all of those who've stood guard over the 9/11 artifact in the front of the building, please all stand so that you can be recognized. Again, you are important heroes to all of us. Through the efforts of many, the Olathe community has now been entrusted with the responsibility to house and keep safe a piece of history, what we've talked so much about today, a piece of steel from the World Trade Center. This artifact we are dedicating today will be a part of this school and also a part of the education of all students of this district and a part of this community for decades to come. We're grateful that such an important piece of history is here with us, that we were entrusted with it, and we vow to remember and honor what it symbolizes. Remember, we will never forget. Now, with great respect and honor, we want to unveil the Olathe West and Olathe Community 9/11 artifact, so please now turn your attention again to the screen. We're grateful, of course, to have such an important piece of history, and we want to all vow to remember and honor what it symbolizes, and many of you will walk by it every day, so always remember what we've talked about today. With great respect and honor, we want to remember that the memory of September 11th is dotted with the heartbeat of those who were impacted. As you have heard, our hearts were broken as 4 separate events commenced that forever changed the landscape of our nation 16 years ago. At 8:45 a.m., the first plane hit the North World Trade Center tower. At 9:03 a.m., a plane hit the South World Trade Center tower. At 9:43, a plane hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And at 10:10 a.m., a hijacked plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. So to honor this, we will be taking a moment of silence as a bell will be rung by the Olathe Fire Captain Brian Chalfant. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to join me in a moment of silence as we end this important event today. And I want to encourage all of you to take time today to think about the people who lost their lives that day, September 11th, 2001, and also to remember the amazing people then and today who worked to help others and to protect all of us. Students, you are going to be dismissed by your teachers to go back to class. That will be following our final musical selection, and we do want to invite our dignitaries and community leaders to a reception in the 21st Century Public Safety Room. That will be immediately following this event. And now the ringing of the bell, and then in silence, the procession out of the gym by our honor guard. Thank you to all of you for being a part of this unforgettable event.